I was standing in the back of the room, the air thick with whispers I pretended not to hear. Someone laughed when I opened my mouth. Not loud, just enough. The kind of laugh that knows it has witnesses. I felt my face burn, my hands shaking, as I held the papers that proved I belonged there now. Years ago, they had made me stand in a line like this for very different reasons. Back then, my shoes were wrong. My clothes were wrong. My silence was wrong. Today, everything had changed except one thing. They were waiting to see who I would become. I realized in that moment that whatever I did next would follow me longer than any success ever could. Before anyone knew my name, before my signature meant anything, I was just the poor boy everyone recognized without needing to ask who I was. I grew up on the edge of town, in a house that always smelled faintly of damp clothes and reheated food. My mother worked cleaning other people's homes. My father disappeared early enough that I don't have many memories of him, just his jacket hanging behind the door long after he stopped coming back. Money wasn't something we talked about. It was something that shaped every decision without ever being mentioned. School was where my poverty became public. At home, it was normal. At school, it was a flaw. My clothes were clean but worn thin, the same shoes every day, even when the soles started to separate. I learned early how to tuck my feet under the chair so no one would see. I learned not to open my lunchbox too fast, because the smell of plain bread carries farther than you think. Teachers tried to be kind in the way people are kind when they don't know what else to do. Some classmates were openly cruel. Others were worse. They looked through me. I was the boy chosen last, the boy whose name came with a sigh. When something went missing, eyes drifted toward me without accusation, as if poverty itself were evidence. There was one day I still remember clearly. A school event. Parents invited. I stood on stage with the others, wearing a borrowed shirt 2 sizes too big. Someone in the audience laughed. Not because of the performance, because of me. I didn't look out to see who it was. I already knew. Humiliation wasn't a single event. It was cumulative. Small moments stacked on top of each other until they became part of how I moved through the world. I spoke less. I watched more. I learned how power worked long before I had any. Who could interrupt? Who could mock? Who could decide the value of another human being with a glance? What saved me wasn't confidence. It was stubbornness. I studied not because I believed in myself, but because I believed in escape. Books became quieter places than my own thoughts. Numbers made sense when people didn't. I worked every small job I could find, after school, on weekends, handing most of the money to my mother and keeping just enough to feel like I was moving, even if slowly. I promised myself something back then, though I didn't have the words for it yet. I promised that if I ever crossed the invisible line between being ignored and being heard, I would remember exactly how it felt to stand on the wrong side of it. At the time, that promise felt almost childish, like imagining a future that had no reason to exist. But it stayed with me, quiet, patient, waiting for the moment it would be tested. The moment that changed everything didn't come with drama. No applause, no announcement. It came disguised as an opportunity no one else wanted. I was in my early 20s, working in a cramped office where the ceiling lights flickered and everyone pretended not to notice. I was the youngest there, also the poorest. That part still clung to me in ways I hadn't learned how to hide yet. How careful I was with lunch money, how I never joined after-work drinks, how I said yes too quickly to things others refused. One afternoon, the manager called a meeting. A client had walked away. A project was bleeding money. Someone needed to take responsibility for cleaning it up, not leading it. not owning it, just fixing what could be fixed before it collapsed completely. The room went quiet in the familiar way. Eyes dropped. Pens were adjusted. Everyone suddenly had something urgent to look at on their desk. I knew that silence. I had lived inside it most of my life. Before I had time to reconsider, I said I could do it. The manager looked surprised. Not impressed. Surprised. He reminded me it wouldn't come with a raise or recognition, just longer hours and a higher chance of failure attached to my name. He asked if I understood what I was agreeing to. I did. More than he knew. That project became my entire life for months. I arrived before anyone else and left after the cleaning crew. I taught myself things no one had time to explain. I made mistakes and fixed them quietly before they could be noticed. When I didn't know something, I stayed late until I did. What hurt wasn't the workload. It was the tone. People corrected me publicly, joked about my ambition, asked, half smiling, if I really thought I was ready for something like this. One coworker told me I should be grateful just to be included, as if inclusion itself were a gift I hadn't earned. It felt familiar in the worst way, like school all over again. Different building, same hierarchy. The project didn't just survive. It recovered. Costs dropped. The client came back. Slowly, then fully. When the results were finally presented, the manager spoke about the team and collective effort. My name wasn't mentioned once, but something else happened. After that meeting, people started coming to my desk, quietly, asking how I'd done certain things, asking for help. Not because they respected me, yet, but because results have a way of forcing people to adjust their behavior, even when their beliefs lag behind. That was when I understood the real shift had begun, not when I succeeded, but when they needed me. The memory of every laugh, every sideways glance, every moment of public embarrassment didn't disappear. It sharpened. And for the first time, I had leverage over the same system that once had power over me. I didn't know it then, but this was the point of no return. From here on, I would either become what had once humiliated me, or I would have to decide, deliberately, to be something else entirely. Success didn't soften anything. It made everything sharper. After that project, expectations shifted without ever being acknowledged. I was given more responsibility, but never the title that matched it. More work, but always framed as a test. As if I were permanently on probation for daring to move upward without permission. People watched me closely now, not with encouragement, with calculation. If I spoke in meetings, someone would interrupt and rephrase my idea in cleaner language, then glance around for approval. If I stayed quiet, it was taken as proof that I didn't belong there. I learned quickly that silence and speech were both risks, just different kinds. The old humiliation came back in a new uniform. There were jokes, always disguised as humor, about where I came from, about how hungry I was, about how I should be careful not to forget myself if things went well. Laughter followed. Light, polite, acceptable. The kind that can't be challenged without making you look fragile. I smiled through it. I always smiled. That was another skill poverty teaches you early. Outside of work, I was exhausted. Inside, something was building. Not anger exactly. Pressure, like a door being held shut for too long. I started saving every spare cent, studying contracts, markets, systems late into the night. Not because I had a plan, but because I knew one day I would need an exit, and exits favor the prepared. Then came the offer. A senior executive pulled me aside one evening, complimented my work, said I had potential. He told me there was room for me to grow, if I understood how things really worked. He didn't explain at first. He didn't need to. The message was simple. Loyalty upward, silence downward. Distance myself from the people still struggling. Stop helping others quietly. Stop explaining things. Stop being generous with information. Power, he said, was about scarcity. I went home that night and didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, thinking about the boy who used to hide his shoes under a desk, about the promise I had made without knowing how hard it would be to keep. Because the truth was, I wanted what he was offering. Not just the money, the security, the authority, the relief of never being publicly small again. But I also knew exactly what that path required. Over the next months, I was pushed harder. Deadlines tightened. Credit disappeared. My mistakes were magnified. Others' mistakes were quietly reassigned to me. It was clear now. I was either going to break, conform, or leave. That was when I took the risk no one saw coming. I resigned. No backup applause, no safety net. I took what I had learned, what I had saved, and started something of my own. Small, unimpressive, long hours again, fear again. But this time, the humiliation wasn't public. It was private, and therefore survivable. The business grew slowly, then unevenly, then suddenly. Years passed before I realized how far I'd gone. How many people worked for me now? How many decisions passed through my hands? How easily I could raise my voice, delay a payment, make someone feel small with a sentence. That was when the real pressure began. Because power didn't arrive as a celebration. It arrived as a mirror. And every day, it asked me the same question in different forms. Was I going to use it to erase my past, or repeat it from the opposite side? The answer wasn't theoretical anymore. It was waiting to be spoken out loud. The moment came quietly, which somehow made it heavier. We were in a conference room that still smelled new, polished wood, fresh paint, money that hadn't learned how to age yet. Across the table sat a young employee, nervous, capable, late with a report that hadn't been late because of laziness, but because life had reached into his week and rearranged it without asking permission. I recognized the signs immediately. The careful posture, the way he apologized too much, the way he explained himself as if expecting disbelief. Around the table, my managers waited. I knew what they expected me to do. I had seen this scene before, only from a different chair. They wanted a correction delivered publicly, a lesson, something sharp enough that no one else would miss the message. One of them cleared his throat and said, lightly, that standards mattered. Another smiled and added that pressure revealed character. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, memory. I remembered standing in rooms like this, smaller, poorer, already guilty before I spoke. I remembered how humiliation had been framed as motivation, how cruelty was justified as efficiency. I looked at the young man, then at the faces around the table. People who trusted me now, who would follow whatever tone I set next. I could have crushed him with a sentence. I had the authority. The room would have supported it. No consequences, no resistance. Instead, I closed the folder in front of me. I said the delay was my responsibility. That if expectations hadn't been clear, that failure belonged upward, not down. I told him we would fix the process, not punish the person. I asked him to stay after, so we could talk through what he needed to succeed. The room went still. One manager frowned. Another shifted in his chair. Someone laughed softly, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. That was the decision. Audible. Irreversible. In that moment, I felt something close. Not a door behind me, but one inside me, the one that would have allowed me to finally take revenge under a different name. I chose not to, and I knew, as the meeting ended and people filed out more quietly than they had entered, that this choice would cost me something. Respect from some, fear from others, control in the way they understood it. But as the young man thanked me, voice unsteady, I understood something just as clearly. Power had finally reached me. And for the first time in my life, it didn't get to decide who I was. People expected me to change after that. Some waited for the correction, the moment when kindness would be revealed as temporary. It never came. Over time, the culture shifted in ways no policy could have forced. Meetings grew quieter, not from fear, but from attention. Mistakes were surfaced earlier. People spoke without rehearsing apologies in their heads. Productivity improved, though that was never the point. Dignity has a way of making people steady. Not everyone stayed. A few left, uncomfortable without hierarchy sharp enough to lean on. I understood that too. Power feels safer when it hurts someone else. I still remember the boy I was, not as a story I tell, but as a presence that walks with me. I see him in the way new employees sit at the edge of their chairs, in the ones who avoid eye contact, in the ones who work too hard for praise they don't trust. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the glass of my office late at night. The furniture is expensive now. The view is wide. None of it feels unreal, but none of it feels like victory either. Victory would have been easy. I could have humiliated others and called it leadership. I could have hardened myself and claimed it was necessary. That path was always open. What remains instead is quieter. I pay people fairly. I listen longer than is efficient. I correct in private. I remember names, not because it's strategic, but because being seen still matters to me. There are days the old anger resurfaces. It never fully disappears. I don't fight it. I just don't let it decide. When people ask how I succeeded, I talk about discipline, timing, risk. I leave out the rest. The part about standing in rooms where laughter taught me exactly what not to become. Power didn't erase my past. It gave me the chance to answer it. And every day, in small, almost invisible ways, I do.